The W123, back when a Benz was a Benz. Behold what is probably one of the most over-engineered cars of the late 20th century. 1982 Mercedes-Benz 200T. The automotive definition of quality. W123 and corner cutting are two phrases not to be used in the same sentence. For those of you not familiar with the W123, please allow me to educate you and show you how the W123 is a lesson in automotive build quality. This vehicle is a Nokia 3310 on wheels. This is at a time where Mercs were not designed and built to a cost, but to an engineering standard. Please, allow me to enlighten you on how heavy duty every button, catch, lock is on this car. W123 is a number used internally by Mercedes-Benz, which refers to a generation of car chassis or platforms built between November 1975 to January 1986. W123 actually refers to the saloon version of this car, meaning this estate example you see in front of you is technically an S123, with the coupe being the C123 as well as the limousine being the V123. But every Tom, Dick and Harry out there largely groups this generation of cars as a W123. The 200T model number is what the car was originally sold as, with 200 referring to engine displacement, a 2-litre inline-4, and T standing for
Tourismus und Transport,
or estate to you and me. The S123 is actually the first estate car produced in-house by Mercedes-Benz. Any previous examples of Mercedes estates were coach-built by external companies. The level of engineering and features retained on this car for 1982 makes for quite an impressive list. Hydraulic self-leveling suspension, 4-speed automatic gearbox, automatic choke, power steering, central locking, although it is the dreaded vacuum-operated type, which, surprise surprise, no longer works, but is the only feature on this car not to currently work. It has rear seats that fold completely flat and actually lock in the down position as well as up. A dimmer switch for the dash backlighting, separate temperature controls for passenger and driver heater, fold down armrest, sunroof, drink shelf on the back of the glove box door, brake pad wear indicators, a built-in warning triangle and first aid kit which appears to retain its original contents. I'm sure those bandages and plasters are about as effective as the Chuckle Brothers are trying to do DIY. The bonnet emblem is fixed via a sprung ball joint for some reason. The load cover also comes with a built-in dog card too. Other features available but not included on this particular car were power windows, air conditioning, anti-lock braking system, self-locking differential gear, cruise control, Alpine horn with selectable volume, retractable steering column, automatic climate control, preheating system for the passenger compartment, Becker radio telephone, and the option of a third-row rear-facing seats. Not only does the extensive feature list and over-engineering make up for the general quality of these cars, but the reliability and comfort reinforce the reputation too. The W123 has often been branded as one of the world's most reliable cars, which would explain why it's a popular choice amongst taxi firms, especially in Germany. It's not uncommon to see examples racking up anywhere from 500,000 to 1 million kilometres on the clock, only suffering from minor mechanical issues. Many examples were shipped out to Africa due to their ability to cope with the rough roads, as well as requiring very little maintenance, making them incredibly popular across the continent. So with its profound reliability, quality and comfort coupled with how practical the 200T is, This would make it ideal for long road trips, which is exactly why myself, the Automotive Anorak, and my good friend Harry bought the car, to complete a road trip up to and around the entirety of Scotland. As a laugh and a joke, we added a few additions to mimic the long-distance expedition rally cars as a bit of a nod to the W123's rallying history. The W123 had great success in long-distance rally, with it successfully completing the 1977 London to Sydney Marathon, a total distance of around 30,000 kilometres, making it the longest rally in motorsport history. In 1978, the W123 took first and second place overall in the East Africa Rally. Our rally version was a little bit softer, compromising of a completely stock car with a roof rack, lights and some stickers, as well as the fact the car has never once touched gravel and was fitted with white wall tyres. Some rally car. Having reliably completed roughly 2,100 miles practically fault-free, with the exception of a sticky rear brake caliper, which occasionally lightly bound on, it is fair to say I've become quite familiar with the way that the 200T drives. So, how does it drive? Slow. This thing is slower than Joe Biden trying to get his words out during a presidential speech. This 2-litre carb-fueled inline-4 is the Mercedes M102 engine, and it's woefully underpowered to be shifting this 1.5-ton barge. The engine makes an power at an RPM. It's irrelevant. Whatever power this thing does make is then completely sapped up by this 4-speed slush box, which is more of a 3-speed box, with the car always starting in second, shifting into first if it really has to, or if you stick it in low. Driving the 200T through the Scottish Highlands loaded with 2 weeks' worth of camping gear and the aforementioned binding brake meant it struggled more than an asthmatic kid in a brass band. At one point we drove up the Applecross Pass, which I highly recommend to anybody. The scenery is incredibly beautiful and the footage you see on screen now doesn't do it justice. Hitting the steep inclines in the 200T saw the top speed of 13 miles an hour, or at least that's what Google Maps said, whilst flat out, with us doubting at points whether it would actually make it to the top at all. I will, however, credit this engine and box setup for being super smooth. It is also beautifully quiet and will sit comfortably at 70 miles an hour on a motorway, although getting up to that speed won't be conducted in a timely manner. You can mash that accelerator pedal all you like and even get the box to kick down, but the car is only going to answer back, "Alright, we're doing this, are we? How much time have you got?" Other engine options available at the time would improve performance, such as the inline-6 found in the 250 models, or the double overhead cam fuel-injected version found in the 280. Diesel engines were also an option in inline-4 and 5 configurations, with the 300TD model getting the benefit of a turbo. Suspension is super soft in the 200T, providing an incredibly comfortable ride. The car glides along and irons out all of the bumps. The seats are heavily sprung, in particular the rear. They're comparable to like a 1930s bus seat. The front headrests are super soft. They practically absorb your head, although their positioning isn't ideal. Generally, the interior of the 200T is made up from decent materials, and that combined with its overall comfort, as well as how quiet this thing is, makes the 200T a nice place to be seated in. Oh, and have I mentioned how practical this thing is? Besides the obvious fact that it is an estate, the 200T has some neat practical features, such as the built-in first aid kit and warning triangle, an underfloor storage area, roof bars as standard, an easily accessible spare wheel, and the rear seats fold completely flat, providing a boot space long enough to lie Stephen Merchant down in. Whilst these features certainly aren't unique to an 80s Mercedes, it is nice to have them all in one car, especially as we are sadly losing a lot of these features in modern vehicles. Safety, the final bragging point of the W123. Passenger safety was one of the key selling points of the W123 era cars. Super strong passenger cells, side impact reinforcement, crumple zones, as well as a collapsible steering column were all standard safety features, which were advanced for the time, considering the W123 was first introduced in 1975. Later models gained the option of ABS, arriving in 1980, and a driver's airbag, which was available from 1982 onwards. Make no mistake though, this is still a 42-year-old car, and a prang in one of these is still going to hurt in comparison to modern standards. 1982 Mercedes-Benz 200T. When a Benz was a Benz. When Benz meant something. Owning a Benz was a statement. Owning a Benz meant you were somebody. Cars have always been social signifiers. And owning a W123 or S123 Benz in the late 70s moving into the early 80s signified you were doing well for yourself. These cars were on the UK roads amongst Ford Granadas, Rover SD1 Vandenplaas and whatever the Roots group was churning out at the time. So nothing really compared to it in its class, other than maybe a Jaguar XJ6. This thing dominated and looked down upon its competitors. The Benz had a universally understood reputation, the type that could silence automotive small talk. I say, the Granada I've bought, it's great, you know. It's roomy, it's comfortable, drives well. What car do you drive, John? Oh, I got a Mercedes. Oh, right. Oh. He doesn't even need to mention the model. Mercedes was a name with weight behind it. This is at a time before the 90s slump of Mercedes, when it partnered up with Chrysler, and a deal that ended up pretty much detrimental to both companies. But that's a story for another time. Mercedes now has gotten over that low point, but their modern cars are now much more accessible through the means of finance plans, etc., etc. The exclusivity isn't there. I guess a modern Merc may grant you some sort of Instagram social status, but it really doesn't compare to what a W123 or S123 meant in the late 70s or early 80s. Driving the 200T in modern times kind of feels a tad hipsterish. In particular when using the 200T for everyday tasks, such as driving to work or picking up the shopping. It makes me feel kind of like a bit of a hipster. A bit alternative, so to speak. I'm not 100% sure why. I feel as if there are 4 main categories for W123 owners. 1. People who have a love for old Mercs, as in Mercedes enthusiasts, probably part of the owners' clubs, and into the preservation of these cars, yada yada yada. 2. People who are nostalgic for these cars. They either used to own one, or their parents had one, quite often the story with many classic car owners. 3. Stubborn old people who've probably owned the bloody thing since the 1980s, and feel alienated by modern technology. Probably only drives it to the local corner shop and back, and in doing so has managed to put a dent in every panel. Some of the trims are missing, and most of the paint has started to peel. 4. Hipsters. Young people who deem themselves too cool to be associated with the norms of modern society, or just simply have an obsession with vintage or retro style, with such a strong desire to express that to the point it becomes their personality. The 200T certainly fits the bill for a hipster car. I mean, just look at it. It's a hipster car. So, does that place me in the hipster owner category? Well, anybody who knows me personally would say that that certainly isn't me. But I guess this feeling comes from the feeling that the world around me perceives me as a hipster for driving around in an old 80s Merc. See, to the eyes of non-car people, a 1982 200T isn't a classic car. It's just an old car. People not into cars don't appear to recognise this as a classic, or even understand that this car would have a following. People outside of cars tend to have an understanding that people own classic cars because they are a visual spectacle, or that there is some thrill to driving them, in which the 200T is neither of those. Don't get me wrong, the 200T drives beautifully, but it's not exactly quick or agile. And as for its looks, I think it's quite a handsome car in its own way, and I personally like its aesthetics. But it's not pretty in the same way as an early 60s Alfa, or eye-catching like a '59 Cadillac. So I get the sense people question the draw to an old 80s Merc, because despite being a fantastic car, the things that make this car desirable aren't immediately obvious, other than to those who understand what this car is. Younger owners aren't owning an SW123 for nostalgic reasons, as this car will predate them, so to own and drive this car instead of using a modern alternative is kind of the hipster thing to do. If your style is to wear vintage clothing and listen to music on a portable cassette player, then an S123 will complete that look. You like it because it's old and because it's not new. I get a sense that that's the conclusion people assume when they see me drive the S123. Should you buy one? That depends exactly what you want from a classic car. As mentioned earlier, this isn't going to give you driving thrills. It's certainly not a head-turner either. When I drive my '63 Thunderbird, it draws in plenty of attention because it's that stereotypical 50s-60s retro styling with lots of chrome and has tail fins. Okay, most people don't know what the car is and presume it's some sort of Cadillac because that's the name everyone associates with chrome and tail fins. But the point is, it draws in attention from everybody, both car and non-car people alike. A Mercedes 200T won't do that. It won't draw in crowds, but to those few who do understand what this vehicle is, they will give you quite the appreciation and they will want to talk to you, share their experience with the W123. Are they affordable? Kind of. W123s follow the same pattern as most other classic luxury cars in the fact that they are cheap to buy but not to maintain. Whilst these cars have depreciated from what they were new, spare parts haven't and can be pricey, or at least that has certainly been the case here in the UK. Parts may be cheaper in Germany, being the birthplace of this vehicle. I don't know. If you live in Africa, I'm sure you can pick up some cheap spares from your local market stall, given how popular these things are over there. As for the US, parts are pretty expensive, similar to here in the UK. To actually buy the vehicle itself is pretty inexpensive, where a reasonable saloon example can be acquired for well under 10k. Wagons fetch far more money as they are rarer, and will set you back anywhere between 12 to 18k at the time of this video. Are they easy to maintain? Despite prices, parts are easy to attain, and as mentioned before, these cars are very reliable, resulting in low maintenance. Base model cars are relatively straightforward, but as soon as those optional extras are loaded in, these vehicles become very complicated very quickly. Self-leveling suspension systems, mechanical climate control systems, and vacuum-operated central locking are all systems that I personally wouldn't want to touch. So weigh up whether that's for you, or if you can put up with them not working if they fail. If you know what you're doing with these cars, they will live forever. And they will always be in fashion, because this was an era of Mercedes, when a Mercedes was a Mercedes. If you can appreciate well thought out, quality engineering packaged into a discreet and understated classic, then this may well be for you. If you do fancy W123 or S123 ownership, then this very example could well be yours. As our Scotland road trip has come to an end, this particular 200T is up for sale and is live up on eBay at the time of the release of this video. It will be sad to see the 200T go. We've had some great times with this car, and she's certainly served us well. This particular chapter ends here, but my story with the W123 may not yet be finished. I hope sometime in the future we cross paths again, and maybe someday I'll own a W123 again. But for now, I say goodbye.
Oh, that speedo is mint.
That is absolutely mint.